Artist Talk. I want to welcome everyone here to the Firehouse Art Center. My name is Elaine Waterman and I'm the Executive Director. The Firehouse is a nonprofit art center in the heart of downtown Longmont on 4th and Kaufman, providing life-enhancing art experiences through art exhibitions, art education, and cultural events. Our Artist Talks are casual chats with artists, curators, members of the creative community, and creative entrepreneurs with a focus on how to build community within the arts. Firehouse Artist Talks give the community a chance to ask questions and get to a deeper level with the art on our walls. We are taping this talk, and you can find it on our YouTube channel, along with our past Artist Talks and presentations. And a shout out to our sponsors, the LDDA, Longmont Creative District, Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, the Longmont Community Foundation, the Community Foundation of Boulder, the Boulder County Arts Alliance, and to Colorado Creative Industries. We couldn't connect our community to creative and life-changing art experiences without your help. If you would like to donate to support our programming and exhibits, please visit our website or donate at the front desk. And lastly, in the spirit of healing, the Firehouse acknowledges and honors the Arapaho tribe, the original people of the land upon which the Firehouse sits. We also wish to acknowledge all other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. It is because of their hardships and sacrifices that we are able to be here sharing this art with you today. The Firehouse believes that we can only grow when we have a better appreciation for the history, legacy, and contributions that the tribes have made, not just to this region, but to the nation. I'm so excited to be here today with resident artist Doug Felkley. I just wanted to give a little background on the residency. We host a summer and winter residency each year, working in the South Gallery before a culminating solo exhibition in the main gallery. The Artist Occupied program at the Firehouse is intended as a professional development opportunity for emerging and experienced visual artists, where we hope it will bring the artist's work to a new creative level and also connect visitors to working environments and processes. Doug Felkley is a teacher, a sculptor, and sometimes reluctant furniture maker. After retiring from a decades-long career as a gymnastics coach, Felkley found it was time to explore an entirely new second career. This desire for something new led Felkley to study fine furniture making and design at Red Rocks Community College. Upon completion of the program, he began taking commissions for custom furniture pieces, something that he found extremely stressful. Looking for a new creative outlet, Felkley began experimenting with wood-focused sculpture and found expression for his creative ideas. Although he felt deeply connected to his new creative path, Felkley missed working with students, and out of nowhere, an opportunity to be a middle school woodworking teacher showed up. Now teaching woodworking as an art form gives Felkley an outlet both for both of his passions, teaching and art. Yay, so welcome. So I guess I wanted to get started with what your purpose is for art. So a large part of art is about telling your story, connecting with people through that story, and finding a community where you belong. What is the story you're trying to tell with Seconds, and what does the title mean to you?
One thing that's challenging for me with art, especially starting late, kind of getting into this at 55, is I talk to a lot of artists and they have these amazing stories about their art and what they're trying to tell, and I look at mine, I'm like, I just like to make things. And so it feels a little intimidating to think about what my art is really trying to say. In Seconds, the idea is found objects, things that have been in my family for years, things that have been in my garage for years that just were wanting to become something, and then how can I turn those things into something that I wanted to look at, an idea just being expressed through these found objects. And it's really about the idea of taking something, giving it a second life, a second purpose, and seeing what that might become. Often I don't really know what it's going to be, just start playing with ideas. I have a practice in my studio at home that Jean, my wife, calls procrastinating, where I'll have an object on one of my tools, and I have a dartboard set up, and I'll throw darts, and I'll walk past this object many, many times while I'm playing darts. It's like, and then finally an idea comes to me. So I was calling it procrastinating, but she was really generous calling it procrastinating and giving it a better name.
I thought you were going to say that you were throwing darts and wherever the darts landed. That's the thing.
I told you what to do.
Sometimes the darts bounce off the dartboard and land in really weird places. But and then another thing that seconds really means for me is a second career. I coached gymnastics for 34 years and loved it, but wanted to do something different while I was young enough to do something different before I got grouchy with the kids and hated what I was doing. And originally thought about going maybe to cooking school, and I did one day at the Bauman Institute in Boulder, cooking school for organic cooking and things like that, and had a great time. And actually we did a pop quiz and I did okay on the quiz, but realized I don't have a palate for food, and then at my age, do I want to get into the restaurant world and be working at midnight?
Yeah.
And then again at 6 in the morning prepping. And so I had done a little bit of woodworking when my son, Mac, who's in the back row, was little. I made some toys for him, a castle that became almost too big to fit in the house, but it was big enough for him to sit inside and play. And so when it was time to leave gymnastics, I thought, all right, maybe woodworking. And there was a program in Maine that I thought about going to. It was a 3-month program, and this was right after Jean and I had bought a house. And I thought, this isn't really going to work to buy a house, be moving in, and then I'd leave for 3 months and go to Maine. And then we found the Red Rocks Community College, and their woodworking program there is amazing. And so it's just sort of the idea behind seconds was second use, second careers, second opportunities to try again and see where things lead.
Very cool. So as far as this opportunity to be a resident in the South Gallery for 3 months, how has that experience been? And a part of the residency is involving the community. How did you do that? It's a 2-part question.
The residency itself, I was really kind of nervous about applying for that and having a lot of self-doubt in what I'm doing, and do I really have a place in the art world, and is this something for somebody like me? And Jean was super encouraging on that, and so I applied, and just in that application process, I was thinking about what items I might want to do and what I wanted to create, and being in the South Gallery for 3 months has been a phenomenal experience, just connecting to people in the community that are stopping in and seeing what I'm up to, asking questions, stopping in every day. There's one gentleman that lives on 3rd and Kaufman who came by weekly to just check and see what my progress was really fun. Rick, who's a resident, an artist upstairs, would poke his head in, talking with you, seeing Reed every week, all of those things were really felt connecting. And being a coach and a teacher, I wanted to have my community engagement be something that was like doing a lecture or something like that didn't feel right, but teaching something did. So I did a bending class where we took layers of wood, thin layers of wood called veneers. We put glue in every layer, then we wrapped them super tightly in packing tape, bent them into funky shapes, which are up on the wall behind me. And it was a 2-day workshop that was just so much fun. And everybody who did the workshop was an artist of some sort. And some people were using the bent wood to create forms to support their sculptural work in clay. And they weren't really using the bent wood for art, they were doing it as a way to make art. And it was really fun. I think, Kelly was a shop assistant / participant.
It was very fun. It was great.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And then thinking about what I wanted to do for a second workshop, decided on wand making, magic wand making for kids, which is something that I teach at the school I work at. And that was super fun. And then there were a lot of people like Diane McKenzie that were like, hey, we should do an adult wand making. So we had an adult wand making, which was super fun. We just got together, carved, made a big mess, made all kinds of really interesting things. And so for me, that was one of the highlights of the residency, was just connecting to people through the workshops, having people come in and ask questions. One of the main questions that I got asked is, do you wet the wood first? And I was keeping a tally for a while of how many times I was asked that question. And the answer to that is no. In the process I'm using, I don't like the wood, but it was fun to just have those interactions almost on a daily basis when I was here.
Cool. So you've talked about wood and then also cooking. Do you have any other art mediums or creative expression mediums that you've worked with in the past?
Not really. As I mentioned, I made some toys for my son when he was little, and then just through gymnastics, I kind of see that as an art form. And as a coach, part of what I was doing was looking at shape and form in what the routines look like or the skills look like. And I think that sort of translated into art and wanting to do something. One of my first sculptures that I made in a design class I took at Red Rocks was I tried to make a gymnast doing a leap out of metal and bent wood, and it sort of worked. It was just a model, and I had this grand idea of making it on this huge scale, and every time I showed that to someone, it's like, oh, that looks like somebody running, which isn't what it was supposed to be. But it was kind of an interesting way to kind of get started and think about gymnastics. I did a lot of sketches of gymnasts in different positions, and then what might that look like as a sculpture. And I haven't actually followed through with any of those except for that first attempt.
And then as far as the materials that you used here, there are a lot of found and organic items. There is even a wing. Can you tell us where the wing was found, how that came about? And then also what would happen to it if you got it in your house and kept it for 50 years? I had questions. Somebody asked me, so I want to know.
That's a great question. So the wing came from walking our dog, Benny, at Lake McIntosh. And, there's a lot of goose activity and eagle activity, and we think that an eagle had lunch, and that was part of the leftovers. And so found that laying in the grass, picked it up, threw it in the back of my truck, grabbed some doggy-doo bags to pick it up because I wasn't sure if there was anything on there, and then it sat in my shop for many, many months and collected a lot of sawdust that I would then kind of blow off, and then it would collect more sawdust. So maybe it's been preserved with the sawdust, I'm not totally sure. Never seen any bugs or anything crawling out of it, no smell, no anything. And so it was, but one of the things really interesting about the wing, in 2014, my dad passed away, and he had lived with us in hospice for 5 months. And his final moments, I had my hand on his chest, and when his heart stopped and he had his final breath, I felt this surge of energy go through my arm. And for the first month maybe of handling the wing, I would have a little sense of that same feeling, like there was an energy that my hands kind of tingled when I was touching the wing, which at first I thought, okay, it's just bugs, and then it's like, it wasn't bugs. And it made me think about the energy of items, found items that are in the show, whether they're used to be alive or maybe not, a piece of metal, but there's kind of this life that these things bring. And the wing was one of those things just really amazing. And I did many iterations of what I wanted to do with the wing, and that one worked. The other ones were really pretty much failed attempts. So I feel like the wing just kind of wanted it just to be itself.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
I like that piece.
Yeah.
And whether if somebody were to purchase that and take it home and in 20 years, would it disintegrate? I have no idea.
It's not taxidermy
know.
appropriately.
No, it's
Yes, somebody asked that, and I just want to have the knowledge to share with them. But so you were saying that it sat in your studio, and you were talking about how your studio you kind of pass by things. How has being in the South Gallery for 3 months changed that process? Do you have that kind of like freedom to pass by things? Or?
well, I brought all of the items that I was thinking about incorporating into the show here. And for example, the piece to the left of the wing, that's a piece that I found in a field when Mac and I were driving past this car that was kind of half buried in dirt. And we finally hopped the fence and went to check out this old car, and that piece of metal was there, and I brought that metal here to the firehouse, and it was hanging on one of the doors in the south gallery space. And so I looked at that piece of metal for 3 months and finally did something with it in the last week that I had no idea what it was going to be, and then I had this idea. So the wood piece that's incorporated in that is an offcut from another sculpture, just basically scrap is kind of what offcut means. And so I was like, wait a minute, that's a really cool shape, and what if I bent that metal into a curve that approximated that shape? The twisting in the metal was the way it was. And I found out through 3 sources here at the firehouse, so I'm guessing it's probably true that it's something that's inside a hot water heater to collect rust, to keep the rust from going off into the pipes, which I'm not sure the science of how that works, but so I just looked at that piece every day for 3 months, and then it's like, huh, let's try this.
So you were saying that when you showed somebody your gymnastics piece, that they said it looked like somebody running, and you had to be in the community all the time when you were in the South Gallery. Did you receive feedback that, how was it receiving feedback that's so freely flowing, I guess, when people want?
I've got a lot of feedback, and one of the things that I've been questioning is, and maybe the painters in the audience can answer this, but I was curious if people go into a painter's studio and say, you should use this color or you should paint. And in the studio here, there was a lot of, well, you should have done this, or what if you had done that?
Wow.
Even at opening night, there was someone that I kind of struck up a relationship with over the course of the residency, and he's like, you know, if you had done this differently or better, this piece would have been really, really good. And so it was, sometimes those bits of unsolicited advice were really helpful and kind of opened up a different way of looking at things. Sometimes it was intimidating. There was a gentleman that came into the studio, and the loom piece near the door to the South Gallery is a found item that I made the wood to support that found item. And someone was like, well, you know, the person in the previous show in Layers, they would have made that themselves. They would have welded that entire thing together. So it's kind of like, are you a slacker because you didn't do that? Like, and that's on me. Like, I took it that way. That might not have been the intent. And so it's interesting with the found objects of, well, I didn't make that. No, I found that, which is part of it. And then I'm interpreting that found thing. But yeah, there was quite a bit of advice. There were some people that saw me in the process of gluing things together, which sometimes, like the piece on the entryway, Kelly, Jean, and I got together, and it took a lot of glue stress to get that thing to bend around the mold the way that I hoped that it would. And people saw some of those processes as they were walking by and were like peeking in the window, and so yeah. But it was interesting. It added to the imposter syndrome a little bit.
Of course.
So you had mentioned that you were a furniture designer, and it was a little stressful, and I probably comes from furniture design. There's like a very strict way of doing it. Also, you're working with commissions, and people have a distinct idea of what they want. As you work in wood, which is, you know, one of the mediums that people would work for furniture design, what have you discovered? Did you have preconceived notions of how you would work with that medium, or did you just approach it with a mess around and find out mentality?
Kind of both. So with the furniture making, initially everything is square. And you have a table and you have a cabinet or something like that. And I incorporated some bending of wood in my furniture, and I took a class on bending wood specifically. And it was still for kind of furniture purposes, but that really opened up the idea that things don't have to be square. And it's fun to bend and to create different shapes. And so as I came into the residency, I knew that I wanted bending of wood to kind of be the main focus of how I was going to do the wood as it relates to the found items. And bending wood is really, really fun and really stressful, just because the process that I was using is very time consuming. And looking at an idea, coming up with a design idea that I wanted to do. I drew on my experience as a furniture designer, but really kind of took it in a way that's like, okay, like the dip sign, for example, I wasn't sure that the wood would bend like that, and would it break, would it not work, and it actually did break, and it did work, kind of at the same time. So it's fun to just experiment and find out, like you said, fool around and find out, is it actually going to work? I made a mold for the wing to try to bend wood in the shape of the wing, and I made a mold which took about 4 hours of carving the pink project foam. So the back gallery was covered in pink foam, I was covered in pink foam, and then it took another couple of hours to glue wood together into the pattern that I wanted, and then I glued all that up, put it on the mold, stuck it in a giant vacuum bag that pulls the air out and forces the wood into the shape of the mold. Came back the next morning and it was a total failure. It did not work at all. And so it's just like, okay, that's fine. I'll go a different direction. And that was kind of freeing to be in the South Gallery for so long and just try things, and if it worked, cool. If not,
Are there any other pieces before we kind of talk about the South Gallery artists as well, like that you wanted to speak specifically about?
Actually, there's a few of them that are, I think, kind of interesting. So, for example, the glass balls back there, those are floats from Japanese fishing nets that are antique fishing nets that my grandmother had at her home on Catalina Island that are probably 80 years old or so, 70 years old. And so those have been in my family forever, and then I wanted to incorporate those somehow. And so for that piece, I had to teach myself how to macrame to hold the balls. So each one of those balls, I did this macrame form probably 4 times to get it right. And then getting the spacing between the balls correct took a little bit of patience that luckily I have from working with kids for as many years. And then the piece on the far left is an interesting piece because the bamboo, so Jean does Japanese flower arranging, and when we first met, she was studying Ikebana, and so I made that container for her as a gift, a Christmas gift for her to use with her Ikebana. And then we didn't do anything with it for years, and then Jean found that barbed wire at a thrift store, and the metal hoop we had from somewhere, and so that piece is kind of mostly Jean, partly me, collaboration between the two of us, and it's kind of fun to just have something that's been one of the pieces that people have really commented on, and that's one of the pieces that I did or we did the least to, which I find really interesting.
And then I did have a question because I keep misremembering. For the C's that are in the back, how much string is that?
So each one of those is 35 feet of string, approximately. And so when I was doing that piece, that stemmed from a drawing that I did in high school where and it's on the wall over here in the process section, where you just take a right angle and you use straight lines to create a curve. It's like, well, how can I do that in 3D, which is how the chair came about. I was throwing that chair away, and I was like, well, that's a right angle. I could try this and see if it works, and then it worked. And then the cardboard model on the wall, I was like, okay, will this work in a curve shape? And I strung that up, and I had drilled the holes wrong, and I realized, oh, that didn't work. So it took a long time to do that. And I undid it all, re-poked the holes in the cardboard to get them in the right angle, and it was time to go home and have dinner with Jean. And so I rushed, and I started stringing it up again, and I did it in the wrong holes a second time. and I was like, ah, damn it. And I took it all apart and finally got it together the third time. So that one I strung 3 different times, so that's 100 feet of string being strung through to get it finally right. And then I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And the original idea with the C's was to do it with brass instead of string. And it was really challenging to drill the holes at the right angles on a curved surface to get the brass rod to be straight. And I strung it up. The one in the middle is the one that I started with. And I put all the brass in, and I couldn't get the tension on the brass, so it was like bending and warping, and it wasn't doing what the string did. So then I took it all apart and did it in string, and I was like, oh yeah, that's much better.
Yeah.
I think I was here the night that you did that one, and I kept on hearing very heavy sighs.
Well, and it's one continuous piece of string, so it's thread it through, and then you do it a little bit, and then you pull string through, and then you keep doing it and keep pulling, and yeah, it was a process.
Well, cool. So I did want to introduce the South Gallery artists, and I wanted to just read a little bit about them so that you know who they are. So Jean Hultkrans is a mixed media artist working with collage, altered books, and ikebana. She has over 15 years of training in Japanese flower arranging and is largely self-taught in collage and book arts. Using found and discarded materials, her work explores transformation, abstraction, and the quiet alchemy of alteration through both visual art and poetry. And Kelly Drumright is a transdisciplinary artist, writer, and audio producer working at the confluence of mad pride, disabled erotics, and queer futurities. They work as a gardener and co-produce a radio show for local station KGNU as part of the Outsources Collective. Kelly is a curious polymath who enjoys learning languages and growing plants. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So part of the residency is that the resident artist has the opportunity to curate the South Gallery. So how did you curate the artists in this space, and did you have preconceived notions of what they would be creating? Did they have some kind of proposal for you, or give you a jumping off point, and then, or did you give them a jumping off point and then back away?
The guest curating of the gallery was something that was kind of a stretch for me. I'd never done that, didn't know what that looked like, and I thought, what a better way to find out than just to kind of jump in and see what happens. So I really wanted to embrace every part of the residency that I could. And so Jean and I talked about, who would be good artists, what would be a good fit, and then I was like, well, wait a minute, that's a really good starting point. And yeah, it kind of took a minute for 2 and 2 to become a couple. And then we would be on walks with our dog and just kind of talking about who would be someone that would be a good fit, and started thinking about Kelly, who is a neighbor down the street. And so when the first time we met, there wasn't really to talk about the residency. We invited Kelly to do it, and they were like, yes. And I had no preconceived ideas, other than I know that Jean does collage and had a show at the Foothills Art Center in Golden, so she had some experience with her own show. But it was kind of just, let's get together and talk and just see what happens. And Kelly showed up with a giant IKEA bag filled with wood and ID bags and different things. Like, well, this is what I'm thinking. Like, this is really fun and really cool. And then I'd go into my shop and pull out other wood, and we were just, like, it clicked right from the start. And it just felt really like a good match.
Cool. So Jean, there are so many husband-wife creative teams throughout history. What is your dynamic in working together creatively? Is someone the ideas person and the other execution?
We were talking about collaborating this morning, which ended up, I was in tears, because Doug said for the next possible collaboration, I didn't say we were necessarily collaborating on that. I haven't agreed to that yet. So I already had some emotions about that today. For this show, I feel like Doug just set me free to do whatever I wanted. And we check in about things. We share a lot of ideas in our house just generally, and I think we push each other to be the best version of ourselves. I think we're equals, but we have very different skill sets. So I think sometimes I might be more of the idea person, and Doug is definitely the executor of ideas to a much better standard than what I would do.
So your background is in ikebana and collage.
Mm-hmm.
How do those two art forms work together? Do you see like
So the school that I'm a part of is a Japanese school that is considered to be one of the avant-garde schools of sort of, you can go wild or you can use repurposed materials. That's sort of one of the goals. It got established after World War II, different dynamic than the previous schools that were established before World War II in Japan. The idea is sort of much more freer expression. One of the lessons is you combine art with ikebana, and so I practiced that a little bit. Never done anything like this before. I think that they marry well together. For me, ikebana tells a story, so does collage. So I think to me they go well together. But it's a little hard to explain how they go together, but so.
What was your concept of seconds? Because the South Gallery is called Seconds Too. That's the title of the show. How is that the undercurrent of your work in this show?
95% of what I did was repurposed materials. So also using the idea of not buying anything, not consuming, reusing. For me it was more about materials than ideas. But
Yeah, some of the ikebana work is so delicate, and then you have to kind of look at it and then look at it again because you're like, oh wait, that's, and then you can place what it is. And then obviously collage, it's definitely a seconds kind of thing. Kelly, same question for you. How does the concept of seconds lead to the work you created for this show?
Well, as Doug and Jean kind of explained, we all kind of have a similar found object sensibility, like being drawn to certain objects or forms, and then thinking that's art, not trash, is our little shorthand. Like, is this art or is this trash? It depends on the day or how I'm feeling. So that is really where I took it and ran with it, and I guess I was thinking, through things, I guess, the other day, and this is also the second time I'm encountering art again after basically, like, I went to school to be a professor and was teaching Spanish, and academia really, like, trains a lot of the creativity out of you. So I use my art practice as a way to be like, breaking rules, or there are no rules, there are no boxes, and I really wanted to push it here because I've been doing more 2D, a lot of growing plants, pressing them, and then using them in various combinations with also greeting cards with that people would send me, and kind of redisplaying the art in a different way in my house. And I wanted to push the boundaries and use my medical supplies and really make people take a second look at things that are, very mundane to those of us who are chronically ill and disabled, and make it sparkly and fun. Same with the queer, trans, gender transition paraphernalia too. I wanted to give that another life and make it sparkly and not like abject and shameful. And there's also there's a few second, maybe double entendre meanings in some of the titles. So like there's nods in the get well soon pieces with the IV bags to bondage and how tethered the queer and disabled life is to the medical industrial complex, but I wanted to make it like eroticize it and make it pretty as well.
So the work obviously draws from your personal experience and brings it into a public sphere. Mm-hmm. What are you hoping people see when they look at these pieces? And I know a lot of them say like, touch me or squeeze me, which was, as somebody who like spends time, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. The first time I saw it, I was like, ah, and then I was like, oh wait, yes.
Yeah.
So what is that interaction? Like, what do you want them to feel about?
Like I wanted to, I guess, force a sort of intimacy, especially for people who that's something that's, not part of your daily experience. And another thing I wanted is to, like, the pieces with the foil leaf are all inspired by kintsugi, you know, the Japanese art of repairing pottery with gold in the cracks, and that highlights a sort of how, I don't know, I like how veiny everything looks too, and that reminds me of trees, and it's all like fractals, you know, so I feel like the red string, you know, sometimes connecting it all together aesthetically. But I guess I wanted people to be faced with it and uncomfortable, or even touch it, maybe like definitely touch it and shake it and maybe behold it in a different way and make people witness it in a like maybe reverent sort of manner.
Very cool. And I was, the title Seconds too actually came at the last minute. And early on, I was thinking this is more of a do ask, do tell story here. And I thought it's the opposite of don't ask to don't tell. It's, you know, important to tell a story. So for a while, I actually thought it was going to be don't ask, do ask, do tell, with the N and the T crossed out. But we went with seconds too.
Which also works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that seconds mean so many different things. Like you were saying, double entendre. Seconds is obviously second careers, time passing. Like, what does it mean? All of those things?
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that kind of happened during the residency, as far as the title Seconds, so being in the studio as often as I was, from January 1st until opening night, I had not been here. Been here every day, almost all day, working really hard. And so I had the opportunity to see people come into the gallery and move through the space. And it surprised me, and I noticed this going to museums and different things, but seeing people, the layers exhibit that was here before, there were 50 or 60 pieces in the gallery. And I'd hear the door open, hear the gallery host say something, and then someone would move through the space, and I'd hear the door open again like 60 seconds or 2 minutes later. It's like, how can you possibly have any concept of what just happened? So they're literally looking at pieces for seconds at a time. And so one of the hopes that I had in my pieces was to maybe get people to slow down and be like, that's a bird wing? Or, you know, how did he do that? Just to get them to pause a little bit. And so it was that idea of the time and the time it takes for something to get rusty and just patina it in such a cool way. And even in the process of bending wood, you know, make a form which could take hours. I'll put it in the vacuum bag to glue up, which is usually overnight. And so each of these pieces took an incredible amount of seconds to get to where it is.
Yeah. And then one of my notes says seconds can also mean secondary quality or something that's already broken or fixed, which kintsugi is that. And then also I know one of your pieces broke and then you had to fix it. Can you speak to both of those, or speak to kind of like what that secondary process is and what that is for the creative process?
Yeah, it's so my teacher in woodworking school called mistakes design opportunities. And I really like that. That stuck with me. And my students that I teach, we talk about design opportunities when they're like, Mr. Felkley, this happened. It's like, well, what is that going to be? And so on the entryway, there's a small piece on there that was supposed to look like this piece to Elaine's right. It was going to be similar to that. And I had made it into that shape. And I was talking with Jean and some friends that were in the studio space. And as I was turning, I hit that, and I just finished it. And it fell off the workbench and broke in half. And like, oh, okay. And so I thought about, well, can I fix it? Can I glue it back together? And then I realized, well, if I glue it back together in a way that it didn't start out, it was better. And so that kind of, I don't know, the destructive quality of breaking something and then seeing what comes from that was really interesting to me. I have a butter dish at home that I broke and have been waiting years to try the kintsugi to try to glue it back together. And I'm thinking, well, do I really want something that touches food to be glued back together in this way? And the real Japanese process is incredibly toxic. the way that they do it. And so I was just going to use super glue and gold dust. But yeah, it's really interesting though, just when things.
I might have some things that you could use. Some getting us free to use.
Yeah, I think that is kind of it. And Kelly's pieces too of just, I was watching them do the gold leaf and finishing off some pieces. I think this is so cool. Really fun.
Yeah. I walked in when you were doing that. I was like, oh my goodness, And then I also asked you, were these pieces sitting in your home? Because there's actually one piece that I really love. And they're all not for sale. But you had said that you had just made them for this specifically.
Yeah, the suspended piece that's in the antique yoke straps that are courtesy of Doug and Jean. I had that one and been working on that one for about 4 years, and then all the other pieces came after the invitation from Doug and Jean to participate.
Cool. Well, I just wanted to give this time a chance for you to say whatever you want to say. I know that you had notes, and I don't know if we've covered it, but I'm going to give you guys one last chance to speak, and then we'll do questions. But before that, I wanted to see, for the three of you, what is on your easel right now, and what are you guys working on?
That's a great question. The next thing, and this is where our collaboration talk this morning went awry, we were talking about the Firehouse does an amazing event called Firehouse Filth, and so we were talking about how we wanted to do that, and I had some ideas kind of building on my piece from last year, and Jean had some different ideas, and so I was like, so that's one of the things on the list. I applied to the Loveland Sculpture Show. That I wanted to do that since starting sculpture, and being here at the residency finally gave me enough time to make a body of work that I could submit. So I find out March 9th if I get into that. And then the residency experience was just so amazing that I wanting to apply to a residency that Jean found in New Mexico that's a week, just a week. You go down, you create for a week, and then your whatever pieces get created are in a show in Santa Fe. And so I'll probably apply to that and just kind of try to get myself out there more.
Cool.
But filth is definitely on the radar.
Firehouse Filth, open wall at the Mocha, and making soul collages. So that's one of my practices.
I'm also thinking about Firehouse South. I mean, there's like some, if you know, leash and collar stuff in the work over there, so I might build off of that using some more medical supplies. And then I do think of gardening kind of as an artistic practice, but it's in like 5 dimensions because you're using time also. So I've got the garden on my mind and the things that I want to start and harvest there.
Very cool. And Firehouse Filth is May 2nd, so you can come see the pieces then. But any last comments from the artists?
I think for me, just gratitude to the Firehouse, to you, to the selection committee, all the support and choosing me. Like I said, I have this imposter syndrome, so it's been really nice to be acknowledged and to be able to come in and be a part of this. Acknowledgement to Jean for helping push me to do this and being so supportive. When we did the setup in here, Mac was with me the entire week, helping me get things on the wall and naming pieces and talking about things. So it's been really nice to have this kind of be a family affair, and just a lot of gratitude for this whole experience.
Oh, I feel grateful too. So I said this at opening night. After Kelly presented what they were going to do, I was like, wait, that's very deep. What am I doing? And I was like, I want to do something that's meaningful. I feel like I have a responsibility to do something meaningful. And I tried so many different ideas that went nowhere. After January 1st, I created all of those pieces. So it was, once I let go of, here's the story I want to tell, the story just came through me. So I am proud of myself too that I stuck with it, because I was just trying to throw a lot of things together and none of them worked until it was like, this is actually my voice coming through. So I'm happy for this opportunity.
Me three, I'm also grateful. And like, especially to Doug and Jean for being such amazing neighbors and comrades and friends and open to creative collaboration. And I guess you asked Elaine what, I hope people get from the work. And a quote came to my mind, Caesar A. Cruise's, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So I think that's kind of what I was going for with this. And I'm excited to see where the art practice goes next.
Cool, so we'll open it up for questions. Does anyone have questions?
I was thinking about authenticity, with the way that I just get concerned, I think, about having so many things online or going somewhere and photographing something and looking around and doing something that isn't really authentic. And I wonder if that ever goes through you in situations. Like, I know it does for me, and I'm thinking about it these days, especially because of AI. But I just wonder if you had inspirations, anything that kind of moved you forward or around, or, just giving credit to other people in situations where maybe something came to you other than from yourself, if that makes any sense.
I think that's a really good question. For me, part of the inspiration came from Jean and her flower arranging practice. So when we were first dating, every Wednesday she would have her class, and I'd go at the end and see what all the people had created, these beautiful arrangements, and then they were gone. They just packed everything up and went home, and that was really interesting to me. And then going into the woodworking program, the teacher that I had was phenomenal. Just this guy who, I remember along with design opportunities, one of the other things that he said that stuck with me was, well, perfect is good enough. And he makes these beautiful pieces that aren't perfect, and he taught us how to talk about our work without pointing out the flaws. And because everything that I've made in here has some flaws that I could easily point out to you, but hopefully you don't see them as readily as I do. And then Laura Tishimoto is an artist that has an amazing chair that she made that's at the Denver Art Museum. And she was my teacher in bending, and the quietest, most humble person who makes the most beautiful things. And her work was really inspiring. And using found materials, it's like, well, I didn't make that. I didn't string up that metal piece on the loom, and I didn't make the barbed wire, but I'm claiming it as a piece that I've done, and that feels a little, I question that a little bit, but also it's like, this is my interpretation of something, and yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question fully, but.
I think piggybacking off of sort of authenticity that I heard from each of you in different ways was just kind of validating the process of just intuitive creation. And for me, that kind of, I remember going to grad school, and by that point, it's all like hammered into your brain, like, what's your intention? And finally I had this teacher who was just like, you create intuitively, and that's totally fine, and so validating that intuitive process and discovery, like you said, you worked on one piece for like 4 years, and all of a sudden it was like, blah, 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 like it all just poured out, and you kind of did everything since January once you let go and just let it kind of unfold without having to define everything. And I guess part of my question too, in terms of intuition, is whether, I guess maybe Doug, you're the one person who, I think that's kind of your imposter syndrome, right? And sort of feeling like if it isn't purely defined, that it's not super valid. And I think for me that authenticity comes through and just trusting your intuition, and that's kind of what makes it, that's just kind of what you reminded me of. So just wanted to say that.
Yeah, well, I think, full disclaimer or full disclosure, I was a student in one of Diane's classes at Front Range, and the way that you taught that class kind of helped with this, and especially the vertical line drawings. that was something that really has stuck with me. And so it's this idea of like trusting. When I was coaching, I would tell the kids all the time, trust your training. That you're going to have a routine, and you've done this 1,000 times. Just trust yourself, get your head out of the way, and just shut up and let it happen, basically. And that happened in the studio, where 3 weeks before the opening, or before the end of the residency, I was panicking that, do I have enough stuff to get out here? And I would be looking at my list of things that I was hoping to create. It's like, well, that's not done, that's not done, that's not done. That's done, but it needs to be done better, all these different things. And then finally it's just like, okay, we'll just let it happen, and it worked out okay. The final thing was the small little piece to the left of the bathroom that happened literally the day of setup. And it failed multiple times before it got to there in that day. I was like, okay. And it was just kind of relaxing into letting it happen.
I wanted to say though, you do talk a lot about, perfect is, what did you say perfect is?
Perfect was good enough.
Good enough. When we went as the selection committee and went through all the applications, there is this, I feel like in the arts community, like if you can only get shows if you have had shows.
Right.
Like it's such a hard thing to do. But you keep saying like perfect is good enough. We knew from your works the quality of the work that you do. So I just have to say that the quality of the work that we saw in the small quantity that we saw was far greater than having resume experience. So,
Well, one of the things that I tell my kids that I'm teaching is, they'll come up to me with something, and I say, well, you're the artist. You tell me, is it finished? Is it not finished? And one of the projects that the kids do is that they make an egg, they hand carve an egg with a knife. And that's one, well, that doesn't look like an egg. That's a lemon. It needs to look like an egg. And keep going until it's an egg. And then once you do that, there's some freedom to try something new. And with gymnastics, it was the same way. You could pull through the routines. Everybody did the same routine until you got good enough to do whatever you wanted. And so that was, I guess, another carryover from my previous life to this life. And, it's hard, too, in the furniture realm, and having someone pay you to make a piece, a specific commission that maybe they're going to sit on for 20 years, that has to bear their weight in different things, that I really tried to let go and hear of, okay, that isn't exactly what I wanted, that piece is a little bit bent, or that piece, whatever, and it's like, that's okay. It's art, not furniture, if that makes sense. And
no.
So there's some freedom in that of just letting go of, I have to be perfect, mistakes are all right.
Okay.
I will say too, in the selection process, I remember saying outright, just having you, knowing your work ethic and your craftsmanship, I was just sort of like, whatever he says he's gonna do, he's gonna do, and it's gonna look amazing. Like I had no doubt in my mind that anything you said you were gonna do is just gonna be great. So I was just like, ding, 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 like that.
Yeah, like hearing how much time you put into stuff that like we don't see here, the redoing that a million times, and like leaving something and then coming back and redoing it, relearning it, like that just shows the work ethic, but also just, shows that there's a lot more that went into this that we don't see. And I think like mentally for you, there's more than one, like you had to let go at some point. I feel like maybe you were like needed to expand on that one piece more. I'm not sure, like that was your chance to do that. So not really a question. I was going to kind of say maybe like, is there anything else we don't see in here that kind of happened that you put into it that we,
Well, I think Kelly reached out at one point and was kind of not sure that things were going to get done, and then Jean had the same thing, I had the same thing, and then when it all started to come together, and the night that we mounted Jean's pieces and Kelly's pieces, and it was really fun to just problem solve that together, and be up and down the ladders and hanging things, and it's like, will this work, will that work, and that was really fun to have that collaboration. Yeah, it's just, it was really amazing to be here and just try things, and If it worked, cool. If it didn't work, there's panic, but it's also okay.
Well, we are a little bit over time, but this is the time for you guys to do a walkthrough with the artists. And if you have any questions about specific pieces, you can ask them. I did want to say thank you so much to all of our artists for sharing your work with the community. It has been an absolute joy to have you as a resident here. And it was really amazing to see the South Gallery come together as well, and just kind of having you curated. I didn't really have an idea of what it was going to be, but the depth of expression in both of your works has been really just amazing to see as well. So thank you so much for sharing with the community. Look around, and thank you so much for coming.